Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. So I thought I would first just give like a minute of history of Chicago Best Ideas, like what the series is. And then I have a topic for you. Some of you might have come thinking we're talking about blackmail, but in case you watch the posters, there are two topics like up and down there. One of them is right and one of them is wrong. So if what you wanted to do was hear about blackmail, you'll have to come to another talk. Like, this is not about blackmail, it's the other talk that's on the screen. And I offer two topics, and okay, I won't bore you with details. And I'm going to try not to talk for the maximum time, and that will lead lots of times for questions or responses, or you could even talk to one another. So your job while I give the talk is to look enthusiastic and eat the food and think about what question or comment you're going to make. So you'll be a good person if you have a question or comment afterwards. Okay, everybody got the idea? So first, a little bit of the history of Chicago Best Ideas. We had like a 100th anniversary of the law school. We tried to come up with like interesting things to do for the 100th anniversary. And one of the programs was the CBI series. And the idea was, let's have a few talks, maybe one each quarter. For a while it was 2 a quarter, but 1 a quarter. And it was like, let's look back in our history and try to think of really great ideas that came out of this law school, or maybe out of the university, but usually this law school. And then let's have a speaker explain the idea. Usually it's an idea that people have run into before in class. Explain the idea to make sure we're all on the same page, and then give like a modern twist to it. Sometimes speakers have done like, oh, here's why I think the idea is ridiculous. Sometimes it's here's why it's a great idea, or here's a little addition to it, or here's how the idea has adjusted to modern times. But the idea is like over time, like while you're in law school for a few years, you'll come across, if you go to all of them, you'll come across 9 Chicago Best Ideas and some modern takes on them. For those of you that came to law school because you were not good at STEM, like that was 3/4 a year times 3 years, and that's how I got 9. Just in case, you know, that's difficult for you, like I just wanted to explain that. And so, over time. In case you ever run a law school, you should be aware, part of the problem with the CBI series is that faculty members are usually out of control. Like you tell them this is what CBI is about, and then being what they are, like spoiled children, they come and they just talk about their latest article or what they're working on. And no matter how much I would say to them, like I started this program, no matter how much I would say, no, it's not your idea, it's somebody else's idea, whether they're alive or dead or currently here or gone. You're supposed to explain somebody else's idea and then talk about your take on it. And they go, oh, thank you for telling me. And then they just come in and talk about their latest article, which drives me crazy. But I'm not going to do that. Like I am going to talk about one of Chicago's best ideas. And then we'll talk a little bit about its applications. And then you'll get to ask the questions that you're already preparing. So that's step number 1. I think everybody has that. Okay. So now we're ready to start. So maybe the most famous idea ever to come out of Chicago, the only one to win a Nobel Prize, was the Coase Theorem, which I think everybody has met already. And so what I want to do is do like a 2 or 3 sentence reminder about what the Coase Theorem is, for those of you that are a little rusty or didn't get it the first time around. And then we'll try an application, and then it's got some problems. And we'll talk about problem number 1, which is fairly familiar to people who go through law school. And then I'll talk about what I see as another problem of the Coase Theorem. And then we can talk about that, and I'll give you a few applications, including ones where I think it's a little bit mysterious about how to correct for the problem. And hopefully that's what you will ask about, or you'll have ideas about how we can correct for the problem. Okay, so first Coase Theorem, then problem 1, and then problem 2 with some applications. Okay, Coase Theorem itself. You live in a building, so the Coase Theorem says, law, like big deal. Law doesn't really matter because if you have a legal rule, like one party loses, the other party wins. If law got it wrong, so to speak, if the party that loses valued whatever's at stake more than the party that wins, the party that loses can always go next door to the party that wins and say, okay, we went to court, but the court got it wrong. If like one person had had both our values at stake, they would have decided the case the other way. So I'll pay you for it to go my way. Let's do an obvious example of it. Imagine 2 neighbors, and one of them has loud party. I'm going to do a few loud parties here. One of them has a loud party. And, you know, they kind of enjoy having a loud party. You know, it's hard to put it in monetary terms, but let's make believe. it's worth $1,000 to them to have a loud party. And then the person next door can't sleep, or they get, terrible reactions to noise or whatever, and they think, oh, the legal rules should be that noise is a tort, or noise is a crime, or noise has to stop at 9 p.m., or whatever legal rule you can imagine that the quiet person likes. And law allows the noisy person to make noise until midnight and with very high decibel level or whatever. So the Coase Theorem says, well, the rule really doesn't matter. What the judge says is kind of insignificant. It's just a starting point for the bargain, because quiet person can go to noisy person and say, well, I see you've got this party in progress, or I hear you're going to have a party tomorrow, but I really value quiet more than you value noise. So let's bargain. I'll pay you $2,000 not to have the party, or $2,000 to end the party in an hour, or something like that. And then presumably, noisy person will say, oh, that's great. I only valued noise at 1,000. You're going to offer me more than 1,000 for me to shut up. Like, that's really a great deal. And then the result we'll get is we'll have quiet. And so quiet will win. And if it's the other way around, imagine the rule is that you've got to keep quiet all the time, and noise guy really loves noise, or his friends come and they really love noise, they could always say to quiet guy, I know the law doesn't allow noise. You could always sue me or call the police or do whatever, but noise is really worth a lot to me. So I'll pay you to allow noise, or I'll pay you to go to a fancy hotel downtown, which will be real pleasure for you. You can go there for 2 nights, not just 1 night, and you'll have a great time, and I'll pay for dinner too, and meanwhile I can make noise. Or really extreme, okay, I'll buy your apartment. Like, I'll live next door to myself, and you want to go to another apartment that costs $800,000, I'll give you $1,600,000. You can go buy a house, and you can have $800,000 left over. That's how much I love, making noise or having quiet, or whichever way the rule might go. So then we like to say, the Coase Theorem says that the original allocation of legal rights really doesn't matter as long as people can bargain well. Okay, how about if we all nod our heads that we get that? Okay, so what are the problems? The first problem was identified by Coase itself, so I don't even want to call that a problem. That's just the Coase Theorem recognizes this factor. As I've said, the Coase Theorem says, well, the parties have to be able to bargain. Coase calls it low transactions cost, a very Chicago-ish expression. You knew that Coase was here in our law school? Everybody knew that? Like, I was a visiting faculty member here, and Coase was still here. His office was on the first floor, which is a little bit odd. It was like over where the dean's office is. I have a feeling it's because people didn't like being next to him. I don't really know. He had an office alone, away from everybody else. But I often went to his office because I thought it'd be great to meet this great guy. And then later on, he retired and he lived in a building a little north of downtown, and I would go visit him and have lunch. And he was really kind of a pretty good guy. A nice guy, very proper, kind of guy. And he would always say everything was transactions cost to him. Like, okay, so that was like a Coase Theorem kind of thing. So what do we mean by transactions cost? Like, presumably noise guy, quiet guy live next door to each other. They can't hate one another too much. They've got to overcome that. A really useful thing would be if they spoke the same language. I mean, that would be really good. It would be really raised transactions costs if they had to hire a translator. Buried in there, they also have to not be too strategic. Like, if I go to you and I say, I'll pay you $2,000 to end your noisy party at 10 p.m., and you realize, oh, like, he really likes quiet, and then you might say, oh, I love noise so much, $3 million, and I'll do it. So bargaining doesn't always work. Like, it might be you hold out or I hold out, that's included in transactions costs. I think that makes sense. Like, normally we think that people who value something can get there through a bargain. It's not always true. There's a lot written about this. Like, why do we have labor strikes? Apparently people can't always reach a bargain. They're both losing by closing the factory for 2 months while they bargain. But usually we imagine that if you want to go to this law school and this law school wants you, like, we can reach a bargain and you'll come to law school. I guess there are a few people that hold out. They say to Dean Perry, I'm not coming unless you make me, a triple fancy scholar. Don't give it to anybody else, but I want to own the building next door. If you do that, they can bargain. And I guess once in a while, somebody really wants to go to law school, and the law school really wants them, and they just can't reach a bargain. But that must be really very, very unusual. So usually we imagine that bargains work. And Coase said bargains work, and by that he sort of means reasonable transaction costs. Okay, so that's the Coase Theorem. All right. Now, if you have any questions about it, you'll have to wait. All right, now problem 1 and problem 2. Problem 1 is well recognized, although those of you who are 1Ls have not gotten up to it yet, more or less. But it's a well recognized thing, which is, wait a minute, so Coase theorem kind of depends on a market. The people have to be able to bargain, usually with money, but it could be something else. Like, okay, you'll have a noisy party, even though law says, judges say you can't have a noisy party. But remember, like on Halloween, I'll have a noisy party. So let's agree, let's bargain, but we don't have to bargain with money. It could be with you violate one thing, I violate another. Or you can have the noisy party, in return for which I can take my dog in the main elevator, which is not allowed in our building. And the other person might say, oh, that's a good trade. Like, it doesn't have to be money. But let's imagine that it's always money. And then the objection to the Coase theorem that every modern progressive student likes to raise is they go, oh, wait a minute. Like, bargaining requires people to have wealth. Like, it's very hard to pay people to have a quiet night if they don't have enough money. So Bill Gates loves the Coase theorem, but then the person always says, but, you know, I am like from an unprivileged background, I don't have any money, and, you know, yet you're here at the University of Chicago and you're spending $4,000 at the student-funded fellowship. But let's not go there. Let's imagine that you actually know some poor people. Like, just try hypothetically to imagine that. So you know some people who can't afford things, and then you say, well, the Coase theorem just doesn't work for me because I can't, the rule really matters, in other words, because if I like quiet and the legal rule is in favor of quiet, that's good for me. Either I'll have quiet, or a rich guy next door who likes noise will have to pay me to allow her noise. Great. You know, then I can choose whether I want more money. Money's very valuable to me. I'm poor. Or I'll get my wish about quiet and noise. Like, great. It'll work one way. But the rule really will matter. Like, it's sort of like you need law to favor the poorer person. And so law really will matter. You'll see in law school, this is called an endowment effect. Like, you know, it must really matter who starts out with, suddenly it matters who starts out with the legal rule, because the legal rule itself is worth a lot of money. That's a good way to think about it. That law is on your side. Law is valuable because you can sell it and get money, and law on the other side is very bad for you because you don't have the means to pay for it. A lot of interesting things going on there. Notice that for most businesses, they don't care. There's no such thing as a poor business in a way, because if it's really worth it to the business, say to allow parking in the neighborhood or something, then they'll borrow money and they'll pay for parking, because by paying for parking, then the business will make more money. Or they'll borrow money, they'll do this, they'll do that. So, you know, it's not like a business has to start out with money usually. If it's a good profitable thing, they'll go on Shark Tank and they'll get somebody to invest or lend money or whatever. But for most of us, wealth might matter for things like having a good view or quiet or noise, or maybe even going to law school, even though you conceivably know you can make money after law school. So for most people, wealth really matters. This is a well-known objection to the Coase theorem way of looking at things. That, again, to review, that the legal rule, which Coase says doesn't really matter, you can bargain around it, does matter for people who don't have money, because even if they could bargain perfectly, there are no transaction costs. Some things are not well put into money. It's not like you can borrow money saying, I'll pay you back because I like quiet. The lender will be like, you know, quiet isn't going to make enough money for you to pay me. It just doesn't work. So for those people, the rule really does matter. Another way to think about that is in advance, if they didn't know whether they'd be rich or poor, for those of you who do philosophy, you could think of it that way. In advance, would all people agree that courts could just decide cases randomly? Because after all, the rule doesn't matter. People will bargain their way. And it might be that risk-averse people would say, well, I don't know, like there's a 50-50 chance that I'll be poorer than the person next door, and then I won't have money to buy noise or buy quiet or whatever it is I want. And so risk-averse people might say, you know, I don't really like that rule. I really think we need to have judges who can really judge carefully whether noise is more valuable over there than it is quiet valuable over there, and decide decisions that way. Or maybe we need a constitution that allows noise, allows quiet, or whatever it is. You notice I like the example of noise and quiet because it's not obvious which one is more moral or something. Like some people, it's preferences. Some people really like one, some people really like the other. You know, I don't know. Like, I guess if I introduced that noise made you sick, then maybe people's sympathy would move one way or the other way. Or if some people really needed loud music, you know, like somehow couldn't put AirPods in their ears, although I don't really understand that. But okay, I think everybody gets the idea. So that's the first problem with Coase Theorem. It's well known in the literature. It was a big thing in the critical legal studies movement. Like, what do you mean, Coase Theorem? Some people are unable to bargain, not because they don't have the language. Like, Coase recognized that, but because there are wealth effects, endowment effects, it was called. So really, it does matter. It doesn't really tell judges what to do. Maybe it means judges should decide some cases in favor of the poorer person. But that, as most of you can figure out, judges don't usually like that rule. First of all, people can come to court faking poverty. Second of all, businesses can, even families, can subdivide into many units. So, like, my family's not poor, but there are 4 of us. If we divided the family into 4 units and didn't speak to one another, then each unit would have 1/4 of the wealth, and lots of people next door to us would then be wealthier than we are. So, it's not usually a good idea to tell people in advance, oh, whichever one comes to you to court and cries the most will win. I mean, that doesn't seem like a good legal system, and there are very, very few legal systems that have that. There's a lot going on there. The richer person might be better at going to Washington and changing the rule. Okay, that's not really our subject for the day. Well, are you going to get to the subject for the day? You're wondering? Yes, there, I'm ready for it. Okay, so what's problem number 2 that I think is unrecognized? And it is about government, and it is about collective action problems. But it's the examples that I want to use on you that are more fun. And the idea is something like this. Like, I live in a building with 20 families, so let's turn the example on myself. So imagine that, one person in the building, we have a bunch of anti-party, anti-noise rules or whatever. So imagine that there's somebody in the building that really likes noise. They want to have a wild party, a couple times a year. But the building, they think the tort system will be anti-noise. So then there are 19 people that want quiet, let's say, and 1 person wants noise. And then that person who wants noise really likes noise a lot. Coase says, no problem, just go to the other people and bargain with them, and they'll allow noise, for that night or whatever. But you see the collective action problem, as we call it. They'll go to, floor number 2 and say, how much would I have to pay you? And anybody could sue to be anti-noise. And there starts being this holdout problem, like, oh, I see, he's got to get permission from 19 people to have noise. I'll make believe that I really hate noise, and then have to pay me a lot of money. And it's easy to imagine a world in which the 19 people really don't need quiet that badly. They could be bought off, but each person will think, oh, I can take advantage of the other 18 people in my group. Like, it's kind of hard to work that out. Can everybody see that, or you need a further example? Like, it's not so easy to bargain with a whole lot of people. That's really the collective action problem. O'Hare Airport might really benefit the community around it by providing jobs and business and a lot of things. You could picture this either way. So maybe the community really benefits from O'Hare Airport, but it pays for a lot of people who live near O'Hare to complain, to say, oh, I really hate the noise, knowing that O'Hare is a very valuable place, and O'Hare, or these other people who like their jobs, will pay the person, essentially, give us your property or something, and then we can make noise. So if the rule is no noise, O'Hare has to pay for noise, or the people around O'Hare who like the noise have to pay for it. And that's not so easy. A lot of people will jump up and go, oh, my ears, I really hate noise, give me money, give me money. And there might be enough people that do that or lie about it or whatever that it's very hard to reach the bargain. So they have a collective action problem, and either way, maybe they really like quiet or like noise. It doesn't matter which way the example goes, because I've tried to equilibrate the noise and quiet issue. All right, well, how big is that problem of the collective action problem? Well, there are a lot of ways that it looks like it can be solved. Let's go back to the building. In the building case, we think now it's hard to bargain with 19 people, but my building is a co-op, but it kind of will be the same result if it's a condo association. So my building is a co-op, and there's a board, and the board can vote on things, or the people can vote for the people on the board, or whatever. So the person who likes a rule and tries to bargain and faces a collective action problem can say, oh, it's really impossible to get all 19 of you to agree to something, so I'll go to the board of directors, and I'll get them to vote on new noise, quiet rules. Well, now they only need a majority vote. That's a common rule. So now they're really in good shape. They'll go to the board, and they'll say, I want a majority vote in favor of, you can pick your pick, say in favor of noise on one Saturday night, a month, a year, whatever. And people might say, well, no, because a majority is voting in favor of quiet, so you don't get your way. And then if I want noise, I'll think to myself, well, I don't have to convince all 19 people to allow me to make noise. All I have to do is convince a majority, and there might already be like 5 people who are happy to have a noise, allowing noise rule. Well, now, I only need several more. I only need half of the 19, so to speak. So I need kind of 10 people. Maybe to be safe, I want 11 people to vote my way. I mean, I also have a vote. So I only need like 11 people to vote my way or to get members of the board of directors on my side. Well, now the other people really have very little holdout power because there are other people who can take their place in the majority vote. So it's much easier to vote on things that are a close call if all you need is a majority, right? We could nod our heads. So that's like a cool thing about majority vote is that it really eliminates a holdout power. That might be like why we allow the government to take land to build a highway, right? Because otherwise, when you see the highways coming your way, you'll make believe you don't want to sell your land at all in order to get, $10 million for your small piece of property. So we have a rule, like a majority rule, like where the government can take your land and then pay you what was previously the fair market value. Well, the same over here. I might really like a majority rule if you made me decide in advance, because majority rule overcomes this problem, this collective action problem of people holding out. Makes it much, much harder to hold out. Okay, I think everybody has that, and now we're ready to try very difficult examples. So I almost want to say, are there any questions? But that would be like class. This is not class. So let's just, besides I can see who's here, and there will be questions if I stop the question. So let's just go to a couple of examples that I find very, very difficult. All right, so I want to do all sorts of problems with driving a car, and then I want to move to climate change at the end. So let's do car. So I drive a car, and then some of you drive cars around here, and you'll know the intersections I'm thinking about. So really this is a place where you go up Lakeshore Drive, and then you get on I-55, because you're trying to go north towards O'Hare Airport or towards some suburbs. And that's a very crowded place. You have to exit, and then you have to get on I-90, 94. So let's call it the I-90 problem. And sometimes of day, there's a really big line. I'm sure everybody has experience where they're from. Sometimes a day, there's a really big line to get on to the next highway. The entrance is really snagged, or whatever the word is. And there's a long line of cars. And there are like 3 lanes that are just going forward towards St. Louis or whatever it is. But then it's slow, and there's a long line. Often there are 5 cars in the line. That's nothing. But sometimes there are like 100 cars in the line. Like it's stretching way, 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 way back. And if you're a good person or you're familiar with the route, you get in the line. And you wait. And slowly but surely, those people are able to enter the highway. And, usually your Waze thing will say 9-minute delay or 15-minute delay. And then you realize just go slowly but surely. All right. Now, every once in a while, we could do food also, like people waiting in line. And but let's stick to the cars for a minute. Now, every once in a while, meaning like every 4 minutes, somebody speeds along left of the line. And then they're aggressive. And then they wait for a little bit of an opening, and they go in. And you, trying to be a polite person who waits in line, you are like kind of mad. We'll go why you're mad in a minute. And you kind of think like, come on, is your time more valuable than mine? Like, get in the line like everybody else. Okay, let's think about that a minute. So sometimes they just really put it to you. They go all the way to the front of the line, like it's the last second when they could get in, or they're going to miss the exit. And it's an exit and an entrance at once. They could miss the exit, and then they just wait. And they wait for somebody who's coming along to think, all right, like, we're going to have to let them in eventually. Like, let's let them in now. And they're usually pretty aggressive. They crawl at a diagonal. And eventually you feel like, okay, they probably are a horrible person, but okay, I'll let them in line. Of course, when you let them in line, it's sort of familiar to all of us who have been on lines a million times in our lives. You sort of realize it's like being at the airport. You're at the airport going through security. You've waited, and then somebody kind of goes, oh, I'm going to be late for my plane. Like, I got to fly to New York. The plane's leaving in 18 minutes. Please let me in. You sort of realize, on the one hand, you might want to be a nice person and let them in. On the other hand, you're not internalizing the cost to the 50 people behind you. Like, it's actually a very difficult collective action problem. So again, you might not want to let them in, like you're also in a rush. Or you might want to let them in, but you realize that you might not be the perfect decision maker about whether to let them in because you're making a decision on behalf of all the people behind you. Sometimes I've been on a line like that for taxis, rare as I take non-Uber transportation. But I'm on a line for taxi, and somebody will come and go, oh, you're in a really rush, can you let me in? And there are only like 4 people in line waiting for a taxi. And then you could turn around to the 4 people behind you and go, this person claims to be in a rush. Like, is it okay with you if I let him in? And they could say, if they say yes, we've got like a unanimous vote, that's fine. That works okay. But in a long line of 50 people or 100 people waiting to get on the highway, you can't really bargain, right? This is a Coase problem par excellence. You can't really bargain with all 100 people. So you're trying to make a decision on their behalf. Even if you believe a majority vote, you're trying to figure out, well, what would a majority of these 100 people vote for? I think it's impossible to know. I mean, you kind of know that most people are annoyed at the person trying to get in. But on the other hand, you don't want to really, you could ask like 3 people behind you, and if 2 of them say, let them in, you might think, well, that's a majority vote of sorts. Not really, because there are 3 people, and there are all the other 97 people further back. Everybody is having a cost, and it's very, very hard to get to the right answer. Make it a little bit more complicated. Sometimes the person cutting in is innocent. Like they're from Massachusetts, and they didn't realize, oh, the right lane is people trying to get onto I-90. I didn't realize that all those people over there were trying to get on the same highway I'm getting on. I thought it was like half a mile away, quarter mile away before you get on. That happened to me when I first moved here. Like, you go there and, now I need to cut in line. I didn't realize this was a line. Like, what kind of highway is this? You got to wait half an hour to get on. But you could picture it. Either the highway is badly built, or it's only true for like 1 hour a day. If it's a long line, it's not worth building 2 lanes. I mean, there are a lot of explanations. So sometimes the person who wants in is kind of innocent, and you feel a little bit better about them. I notice that I am more likely to let them in if they have a license plate from another state, because then I figure, they're not really a bad person. Like, it's okay to let them in, even though the people behind me might be a little bit annoyed. That doesn't seem so bad. Harder is, every once in a while, they're like rushing somebody to the hospital. That's even better than rushing them to a plane. Like, why don't they leave earlier? Like, come on, get earlier and, read at the airport. But they might really have a good reason to go. Maybe they are late for class. Like, what could be more important than to get to law school on time? But I like the hospital better. Like, some of these people, I don't know how many, 1 in 300, like 1 in 10. Let's make believe that 1 in 10 people have a good reason. Either they're from out of state, they didn't know, or they're going to the hospital. I mean, it's much less than 1 in 10, but it'll make the example easier. So there's a 1 in 10 chance that the person trying to cut in line, you're pretty confident is deserving, or if you could poll all the people behind you, a significant majority would say, yeah, of course, let them in. Like, they're not going to do this every day. They have a real reason today. Let's let them in line. But you don't know whether this is the 1 in 10 time, whether this is really a good person or not. So the question is what to do. I think, before I give some solutions to it, that is Coase's second problem. Like, it really is not accounting for these collective action problems where you're in a situation where it's not just, I guess Coase's defenders might say, oh, Levmore was just talking about high transactions costs. I guess you could call everything high transactions costs. But this seems to me more than high transactions costs, because even if I could talk to the people, even if I had them on my iPhone, like they're going to be strategic, or they're not going to believe, or they're going to say, we got to teach this person so they don't get in line next time. Like, it's not transactions cost in the usual way. It's like a real problem of collective action. There's a real human problem here of not knowing how valuable your time is, my time is. And so you have to take somebody to the hospital. Like, well, I don't know. Who's the person you're taking to the hospital? Like, is their life valuable? Like, I don't know. I want to hear more about it. Like, there are all sorts of reasons why you don't, it's a little different if it's a firefighter or an ambulance. I mean, then you're pretty confident that if they're on the siren and they want to break in, aside from the fact that law requires it by majority vote, aside from that, you might think, oh, okay, like now I am required, or we might say morally, I have very good reason to think that the ambulance making all that noise really has good reason to cut in, and even without law, you'd probably let them in, imposing costs on all the people behind you, but that would probably be okay. But now you're in this difficult situation. So I think that is a problem. Just to state the obvious, that is what I call the second problem of Coase. Like, Coase is not taking into account these collective action problems, which are ubiquitous. I'm just going to give you two examples today, but I think they really are ubiquitous. Like, you want to know what other people are thinking and doing. You want to know the value of the 99 people behind you in line. You want to know how honest the person is. It feels like an almost impossible problem. Like, okay, that's a real Coasean dilemma, you might say, and the rule really matters, although we'll turn to what the rule might be in a moment. Let's first try to solve it without the rule. One possibility is that if you think there's a 1 in 10 chance that the person is deserving, again, either deserving because you're like a moral kind of person and you majored in philosophy, or because you're like a public choice or economic kind of person and you think, well, an overwhelming majority of the people behind me would vote for it, or the economists would say, if they really all could bargain honestly and pay money, the guy in a rush really would pay enough to satisfy all the people behind them in line. That would be like an economist's approach. Like, wow, that's a really big step. But of course, if he's going to the hospital to save a life, a lot of the people would let him in free. Some of them might say, pay me $1. Some of them might bargain and say, oh, you're going to save a $12 million life? Oh, give me $11 million. I'll let you in line. Like, whatever it is, a true econ Coase person would say, okay, let's watch the bargains. And if we're pretty confident the bargain would work, then you should let him in line. Okay, any one of those three will do. Now, what do you do in the absence of all that information? It really is a collective action problem. So I'm going to try not to say collective action every sentence, but I think you get the idea. What could you do in real life when you think there's a 1 in 10 chance that either the philosopher in me, the economist in me, the public choice person in me, majoritarian in me, I really would let this person in line, but only 1 in 10 times. 9 out of 10 times, they're obnoxious, or they're trying to take advantage of the crowd, or they're lying, or whatever it is. What should you do? So one idea is you should let them in 1/10 of the time. That's an interesting possibility. Like, they come there and you're thinking 1 in 10 times they really need to go in line and we would all vote for it, or again, whatever the 4 things were. So 1 in 10 times I should let them in. That's kind of interesting. It's better, I think, than never letting them in. It's certainly better than always letting them in. But it's got a lot of problems, because if everybody in line does it 1 in 10 times, then they'll know, then rather than being the 101st person in line, they should go to the front, try to get in, and like, there's a high probability that one of the first 20 people in line will let them in because they're all following the 1 in 10th rule. You notice it's not exactly 10, because each person is 1 in 10, and we got a distribution over there, and what kind of distribution? Like, that's another problem. But you came to law school, you don't care about that. But there's some kind of probably Poisson distribution out there, so there's some chance that they're there. Let's call it 20 people. There's a very, very, very good chance, almost certain, that many of those 20 people would do the 1 in 10 game. And then the guy who's trying to cut in line dishonestly, or not wealth or virtue maximizing, will just go to the front, counting on people like me that have that 1 in 10 rule. Okay, that's not so good. Again, it's better than never letting him in line, better than always letting him in line, but I kind of like it. And when I've tried this problem out on people in the last week, when I was thinking about this talk, a bunch of people said, oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to start doing that. And I'm going to, instead of torturing myself, I'm going to 1/10 of the time let the person in. And then you sort of explain to them, if everybody did that, that would be bad. And then they say, well, most people I know aren't smart enough to do that. Or, and then I say, well, you need a new affinity group or something. Like, that's not so good. Like, okay. So everybody has the idea. Okay. There are other things you could do for the 1 in 10 solution. I mean, there are really a lot of them, but one thing you could do, by the way, what do you mean 1 in 10? Well, you could flip coins, or you could do something to make it random. I guess you could go to the cars behind you. It's a little dangerous, and try to get them to do it. I won't go into it. There are a lot of ways you could try the 1 in 10 thing. They all seem to fail by, if the person knows that 1 in 10 will let them in, it just won't work. Okay, another possibility is, oh wait, we could do the 1 in 10 with an app. If only the app or the government provided a way to communicate with all the people in cars, that wouldn't be so hard technologically. It doesn't matter if the breaker in line has the same, thing. So everybody within a certain number of feet of me could be on this app. And then I could say to them, oh, look at this line cutter guy. Should we let him in? And we could vote. And I could say, I like this 1 in 10 idea. How about if we all agree that 1 in 10 times we'll let him in, and no one else will then do 1 in 10 as well. Like it'll be 1 in 10 for the group to let him in. That might be cool. We don't have such an app yet, but that would be kind of interesting if the group voted, so to speak, or all agreed to do the 1 in 10 rule. Okay. You could see the problem with all these things is that the guy who's the line cutter now knows to lie. He'll always go to the front of the line, always knowing the 1 in 10 rule, and whatever we establish, 1 in 10 times we'll let him in, and that's not efficient. If he's a liar, more and more people will then try to cut in line. I mean, I don't want to belabor the matter, but you can see the problem. It's kind of cute, but it's not really good. All right, how about a government solution? And then I'm going to soon pause for questions. You get the government idea here. Like maybe it should be like the building voting. Like one possibility, and this is my view of the world, one possibility is that Coase, usually thought of in this law school, oh, you like Coase, you're a market person, you must belong to FedSoc. That's like a very Chicago, you're probably not voting enthusiastically for Harris, you guys. I think this is an example of where it's the other way around. Coase is very progressive in this example. Coase is a way of saying, we really need government because the people are unable to solve the problem themselves. Even the 1 in 10, it's cute. It's like dinner party talk, but it's not working for reasons we've seen. So maybe we need the equivalent of the building vote, and maybe we should say to the government, look, we've got this problem, you solve it for us because we can't solve it on our own. So Coase really needs not only low transactions costs, but needs government when there's a collective action problem, which I think there often is a collective action problem. Now, what should the government do? This is not so easy. The government might have a rule, no cutting in line. If the government has a rule, you can cut in line only if it's an emergency. Well, how do they know whether it's an emergency or not? It seems very hard. I guess once in a while they could stop the car and then prove it's an emergency. And you get the death sentence. Oh wait, I want it to be progressive. You get 5 days in prison if you lied, or I don't know. You have to clean up the highway for 6 minutes, or whatever progressive people would want to do. It's not easy, right? You see what I mean? Like even if you take the progressive side of Coase or the conservative side of Coase, it's very hard to solve the problem. I have some ideas about what the government could do in the absence of the government having full information. One possibility, which I like, but I've never tried or seen a government try, it might be that when you get your driver's license, you register your car, the government gives you like 3 pieces of paper. Or really, they do it online. They give you 3 things in your phone. And the idea is that 3 times in your life, or 3 times that you own this car, you're allowed to cut in line. So you have this, let's call it a label, but really it has to be online to be realistic, because people would sell it, it's got problems. But the idea is that 3 times in your life, which might be a realistic assessment of when you're really in a rush for safety or saving people or even getting to class in time or whatever. So 3 times you can cut in line. That means that you will not be a strategic person. Most people are risk averse. They'll save 1 or even 2 of the tabs that allow them to cut in line. That might be a pretty good governmental solution. Again, it's not a Coasean solution. I think Coase never would have dreamed. I mean, Coase didn't know about apps, but Coase never dreamt of such things. Actually, one time I went to have lunch with Coase to try it for the law school. And I pulled out my phone because it was buzzing like crazy. And Coase said, "Huh, what's that?" And I was like, "Oh, like that's what it's like to be 100 years old." I think he was 100 or 98 or something at the time. Like, wow. And he said, "Let me see that." Like, wow. And he claimed it was the first time he had ever seen a smartphone. Like it was really very exciting to show somebody a smartphone for the first time. Very exciting. And I made up all these things it could do. Like it was, oh, we can keep track of wherever you are, and you tell me you don't have enough money to make a gift. No, the phone says you have $2.8 million over here. And he was like, wow, this is really fantastic. I bet that thing will sell well. Which he really said. And I thought, the guy's charming. I mean, this is really great. Okay, but you see the idea that maybe the government could solve the problem by giving you like 3 freebies, And most people would save at least 2 of the freebies, if not 3, and you get the idea. But the bottom line is that you kind of need the government. So for my last example, it's obvious from where I started. The last example is climate change. Like, oh, climate change may be our best modern example of this. Like, I think about recycling, I think about polluting or whatever it is, or taking a car to work when I really could walk. And then I think, oh, I'm contributing to a climate change problem. And then I think it's like littering. I think quite realistically, you know, my own contribution is virtually 0. Even a whole country, you know, if you're Canada, does it really matter what your rules are? Like, you know, with India and the United States and China and Russia, like ruining the environment. In fact, it's likely other countries will ruin it more if they know the EU and Canada, like, oh, they're very well behaved. Like, you really need like global agreement by almost all the countries to cut back on carbon emissions before you really can do anything, just to take the modern example. And each one suffers from this collective action problem. Oh, I'll just hold out because if all the other countries do it, then it's okay if one country makes a mess. You could bribe me, pay me, and we'll stop using fossil fuels. You know, you could, well, you pay me $10 trillion, like the bargain might not work. It hasn't worked so far. So you really need like a general agreement. Let's do it within one country. You need a general agreement within the United States to preserve wood or to affect climate change in other ways. It's very, very hard. Like, I think Coase completely fails. It's impossible to bargain for it other than trying to educate people, which doesn't seem to work very well, and so forth. The only solution seems to be that you kind of need a government. You need the government to try to set rules, either by majority vote or other ways, that try to say, okay, you can contribute to climate change a little bit in a certain circumstance. It's like you can make noise once a month on Saturday night. And I think it must be that if you believe in Coase, as I do, you would like the government to step in and have rules about climate change. You know, should there be carrots, should be sticks? I'm not sure it really matters. There are all sorts of ways to do it. They have their problems. But it's a failure of Coase Theorem. It can't be, it's such a collective action problem, so impossible to bargain, that it might be that chits are not a bad idea. It may be that we should give you like 3 opportunities in your lifetime to severely violate what we need for climate change. 3 times in your lifetime, you can go to a national park and light a wood fire. Like, okay, it's a terrible thing to do. You might destroy trees. The wood on fire, like the climate change is really awful. A lot of towns, you know, have barred you from having that kind of heat-making thing in your apartment or house and whatever. Like wood-burning stoves, they were very, very cool when I was a kid. Now, if you go to a party and there's a wood-burning stove, never go again. Like, the person is really evil, especially if they live near the Sierras or some mountain system. Like, it's not dangerous. It's just terrible climate change thing over there. So it might be that we need a government to outlaw wood-burning stove, or to say, okay, 3 times in your life, you can go to a hotel and turn on. You know, that might not be such a bad solution. It might satisfy a lot of people and all that. So the moral of the story is, Coase lives on, whether you're conservative or progressive in your attitude. But I wish that Coase and the first 50 years or whatever it is of people who thought the Coase theorem was really clever thought about these severe collective action problems and what we could do about it. Okay, that's the end of my talk. And now I would love some questions or comments. I'm going halfway in the room.
Okay, so you mentioned as an objection to like the paper freebies, you mentioned that people would sell them. On behalf of UChicago.
But it won't work if it's in your phone, right?
Like, what's the issue with people selling them?
Yeah, okay. Because I was trying to predict your question and say, well, that'll run into the first problem with Coase, which is wealth effects. So there's no reason to think that Bill Gates cutting in line, that his time is more valuable than your cutting in line, or his need to save people is more valuable than yours. So if you can sell them, Bill Gates can buy as many as he wants, and then he can cut in line whenever he wants. And I think most of us would vote against that, especially now that he's retired. I mean, his time is not more valuable than yours. Probably yours is more valuable than his. And whatever business he does, or whatever good deeds he does through his Gates Foundation, he can probably do on his phone in his car. So it's really not that valuable. He's just impatient, no more or less impatient than most of us. So I was trying to look ahead to wealth effects.
So it seems like one of the problems with people, let's just use the cars in a line example, is that a person who cuts has no consequences for doing so if they get away with it, whereas in a smaller community, a person might be less inclined to do so because they would have reputational harm from doing that.
Even though sometimes it is worth it for them to cut in line.
Right, but then the community might be more forgiving because they would say after the fact, oh, we recognize that we wanted to do this, so there wouldn't be the reputation.
Totally.
So if you're suggesting a government outcome, even going so far as to say apps or communication between parties, what's the bridge from that to saying, oh, what about a social score where we just have a social score within society, you each have your own score, a person with a higher score, you might be more likely.
Right, and just explain the question, how do we know what the social score should be when it's not a tiny community?
Yeah, right.
We don't know, right? It won't work in a large community. In a small community, we barely need it because people know each other's social scores.
Well, so I guess what I'm getting at is, there was a Black Mirror episode a couple years ago where a social score.
So let's take the law school as an example. So people wait in line for lunch food, or wine mess, whatever. So to newcomers, I mean, when I was never a student here, unfortunately, but when I come and I see the lines, I'm like really impressed. Like you guys are very sensitive to the line. Either you're good people or you're afraid that your reputation will go down if you just cut in the line. It's not bad. I mean, it's very nice. It's not so efficient. Like getting early there is sacrificing time or sacrificing some class or whatever it is. It's not perfect, but it takes away the wealth effect. So people seem to like it. You get there early, you get to the front of the line, you're guaranteed to get food or whatever. People seem to accept it. The cutting in line just seems like a bad idea. Well, if you cut in line, people think you're a bad person. On the other hand, if you're the faculty member who gives the talk, notice no food. If you're the faculty member who gives the talk, the people running it will always say, oh, you can go to the front of the line. And nobody seems to resent it because they think, well, he's giving the talk, he's like special, da, da, da. I don't know. I don't know if that's perfect, but it feels like people somehow accept it, and in the social capital, it kind of works. Same thing with picking up trash on the floor. Like if you pick up trash, your social score goes up, and people think, well, it's a collective action problem. We all would rather have a clean green lounge. But, there are a lot of things like that where you can signal. But sometimes as an outsider who really is in a rush or has signaled high social capital, and I'll give you an interesting example. We have a student who became a priest after going to law school. Total waste of our law school. And would occasionally come back here to visit friends. And the guy was really like, man, what an outfit. It really was terrible for me because the first time he came, it was like around this time of year. And I knew him, I had him in class. And I thought, oh, you're getting away with that Halloween costume? Like, really? Like, you might get in trouble. And the guy looked at me like I was the only one in the world that didn't know he had become, what he became. But the interesting thing to me was that he went to the lunch talk that a friend of his on the faculty was giving, and he cut in line. And I was like, whoa, like, this is really costly. People will think less of you. Well, you're not in their community anymore, but they will think less of your entire order because, it shows that people of that order, like, are these insensitive people who cut in line. You should be running around picking up trash off the floor to show what a good person you are and how evil the rest of us are. But the interesting was that all the students in line were like, oh, please. Oh, father. He wasn't the father, but they didn't know that. You know how young people are these days. They didn't know. So they let him in line, but I think it's because he signaled already that he had high social capital, he wasn't earning any money, he wasn't doing anything, he wasn't doing that. So it was a little bit like your question. Like, he was in a world where there was this external measure of social capital. But I think for the rest of us, it just doesn't work. If I want to cut in the line, if you want to cut in line, and you say, I'm really sorry, but I need to go to this talk, and I have to go to the bathroom, you give them full information, this is going to roll their eyes at you. Like, it just doesn't work. You're really much better off going to the back. Even better if your best friend is there, third in line, and you go, oh, is it okay with you guys? Like, we haven't talked in a while. I'd really like to get well, your friendship's worth more than mine. Like, go to the back, So I don't think it works. And small communities don't need it, large communities. Okay.
So I think if I were smarter, I could work through this on my own, but I'm wondering, I think this is more responsive to actually
See the social capital move starts out with a little self-insult, so we all think better of him. It's kind of a cute strategy. It's really not going to work. Go ahead, dumbbell. Yeah.
do ambiguous property, do property rights with ambiguous boundaries blunt the problem?
For example.
So for example, when you're on a plane, I'm someone who's like for the same social capital reasons, terrified to reverse my seat into the other people's lap. It's kind of ambiguous when you buy a plane ticket,
Yeah.
are you buying the air in front of you or also the air that your seat goes back? There's all these fights that break out.
There is a wealth effect.
Exactly. So I'm wondering about in the cases where there's these asymmetric like bargaining power, this kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great question. I don't think it's as big a problem as you're making it sound. Let me just explain why, because I love the example. So many people don't put the seat back. Many people just lurch the seat back and crush the person behind them. I mean, those are two common behaviors. Like, they don't care, they're not repeat players. Some people, I think this is a nice thing to do, would be to say to the person behind you, you know, I'm really tired and I'm going to put the seat back, but let me know when it's really interfering. And then, of course, I'll move it back. And then the person behind you also has this social capital thing, or they'll go, oh, no, it's okay. Yeah, I'll let you know. And they are willing to suffer a little bit because they think you're such a nice person for saying, please let me know. It would, you could see other examples of this, even with littering or something. Oh, we got a kid, he's got to go to the bathroom. So I know I'm a horrible person leaving my McDonald's thing right on the ground here, but I'll come back later. Is it okay with you? And most people go like, oh, it's okay. You're so above average explaining to me, even if you're lying about why you're leaving your trash on the ground. Like, people seem to get away with it. But the better way to go about it, certainly the way the two of us would go about it, would be to go to the person behind you. I have two methods. One would be to say, look, I really want to put the seat back. I know it's an inconvenience to you. How about I give you $10? And I put the seat back. Well, I want you to be indifferent or even feel better about my putting the seat back. Usually, the person behind would go like, wow, that's so nice of you. Oh, no, I would never charge you. Just put your seat back. I'll let you know if you've broken my knee. So even just asking makes you seem like a nice person. Every once in a while, the person will go, oh, that's a fair trade. Interestingly, sometimes the person will go, no, but for $13, I'll do it. That would be very, very interesting. We've had graduates, having heard this idea, have tried that. Professor Henderson, having heard this from me once, but not this version of it, will go, oh, I'm a really tall guy, I really need a seat. How about I'll give you $50 if you give me your seat. It's like a good seat with an aisle. I'm in row 37 middle, and I'll give you $50. And then the person goes, no, like, get out of here. What are you, like, Mr. Economics? Like, no. And then Henderson will go like, oh, Levmore's idea is crazy. Like, that doesn't work. And I'll go to Henderson. It's because you're like an idiot. I mean, he's a really good friend of mine. You're an idiot. You don't go to one person because they have holdout power. You should say to the 20 people who can hear your voice, I need more leg room. I'll give $20 to anybody willing to switch seats with me. I'm in 37E. If you've got a lot of leg room, I'll pay you $20. And then he said, oh, why didn't I think of that? Every other time when I offered it to 20 people, at least one person jumped up. In fact, a couple times, someone said, I'll do it for 15. No, 12. And then they would trade seats. So again, you want to avoid this holdout problem, but markets are pretty magical. So I think, you shouldn't underestimate the market over here. You can usually find a solution as long as you can avoid these Coase Theorem problems. Yeah, I'm watching the clock. We have time for either one or two more.
I'll make it quick. Back to the car example, I'm curious if there's not already equilibrium because of social value. I place on being a good person, right? So this person doesn't value being good. I value being good.
Well, maybe it's not being good to let them in. I mean, you're hurting the 97 people behind you.
But I appreciate that.
Sometimes when people in front of me let the person in, I'm like annoyed.
Okay.
Like, oh, yeah, you get credit and the rest of us suffer. Like, oh, I don't know.
While we're waiting in the line, we appreciate that because we're waiting, somebody's going to let them in line. And there's goodness, you can make the back line.
Okay, so then it's neutral. You're not good. You're just thinking, like, it's not really costing the rest of you anything because someone's going to do it. Like, okay, what can you do? Yet this person is obnoxious 9 out of 10 times by imposing costs on all of you. I don't know. When I was a kid, this is kind of like a curious thing, and maybe other people have this experience. So it was a very lower middle class place and lower middle class school, and there were lines for everything. People did not really cut in line. But there was this thing where somebody could come to you and say, can I cut in line? And at first there was this thing that was ignorant. It was like, well, I have to let you in line in front of me, because that imposes at least some costs on me. It's not taking into account the 97 people behind. So it's not really a very clever solution. But it was considered totally wrong to say, oh yeah, you can get in line behind me, buddy. Like, I was like, are you kidding? Like, that's imposing costs, not on yourself, right? Everybody's along with that. So it was a big thing like, oh, hey buddy, frontsies. And frontsies is what we called it. And like, it was okay if you let the person in line in front of you, again, showing that you were absorbing costs. Again, we're more sophisticated than my crazy school, and we know that that's really not right. The hilarious thing about frontsies, anybody else have frontsies in their lives? Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So the hilarious thing is, in my school, they're developed this thing called frontsies backsies. Like, oh, you want to get in line? Oh, frontsies only? Yeah, you can get in line in front. And then I tap you on the shoulder and I say, oh, do you mind if I get in line in front of you? And then I ended up with you behind me. And somehow this was accepted. Like, it was cool. You'd want to cut in line and you go to the person, frontsies, backsies? And they would go, oh yeah. And then we'd go through the motions. I would get in line in front of them, then they would tap me on the shoulder, let them know behind me. And somehow, I think, these were not dumb people in school. I think it was like, the general idea was the humor was worth the inefficiency. Like, it was regarded as that we are hilarious people. We do frontsies, backsies. Frontsies, backsies in your school or not? Frontsies, backsies.
Yeah.
And you called it that?
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. So either my neighborhood got it from yours, like a couple hundred miles away, or yours got it from mine. I don't know, but it just always seemed weird to me. I think we've run out of time. So if you have questions, why don't you email me or talk to me after the talk. Thank you so much for coming.